Nothing's gonna stop us. Nothing's gonna stop us. Nothing's gonna stop me reviewing this movie. Caution. The following video is an in-depth review of the movie I'm currently reviewing, which means that there will be massive spoilers in the review. If you haven't seen this movie yet, then please feel free to watch this movie first before watching this video. However, if you have already seen this movie, or you just want to know my thoughts on this movie, then keep watching. This video was requested to me by Newwaytoofeelthepain, and it was requested many years ago when reviewing movies and TV shows were my main priorities at the time. I know that it took me a while to get around to reviewing this movie, but I finally got the chance to. And now without further ado, here's my movie review on Cats Don't Dance. Cats Don't Dance was one of those films that was not only heavily underrated, but it was a very unique type of film. I never would have thought that I would see a film that has zany animation that's very similar to the Looney Tunes series. Okay, actually this movie was made by the same company who also made the Looney Tunes franchise, which is why the animation and gags are so similar to Looney Tunes. But you get the idea. Also, it is such a shame that this film was a box office bomb due to the film being promoted poorly. Not to mention that this film ended up going under the radar for many people, and it didn't quite receive the same popularity that Space Jam had received a year before. So before I get into what I liked and hated about this film, I would like to give a brief summary to this film. The film takes place in 1939 Hollywood, and a talented and optimistic cat named Danny decided to leave his home and go to Hollywood to become a big star. Once Danny arrives in Hollywood, he ended up getting a small role in the newest film that stars Hollywood's biggest star, Darla Dimple. But when Danny tries to show off his singing and dancing talents in the middle of Darla Dimple's performance, he ended up upsetting Darla Dimple. It was then that Danny learned that in Hollywood, animals were not allowed to take on major roles like humans can, and they were relegated to small roles where they barely had any lines. Once Danny learns about this, he decided to gather up his new animal friends and try to find a way to impress the famous Hollywood studio executive L.B. Mammoth. But unfortunately, Darla Dimple finds out about the animals' plans, and since she doesn't want the animals to steal a spotlight, she decided to find ways to sabotage the animals' efforts in impressing L.B. Mammoth. Cats Don't Dance was a very interesting movie. Not only were the gags and the animation reminiscent of the Looney Tunes franchise, but it managed to tackle various subjects that were surprisingly mature for a young audience. For one thing, I never would have thought that a film like this would tackle the subject of prejudice and racism, although it used animals for that metaphor. And another thing, this film also discusses about the negative side of Hollywood, and that just because something looks glamorous on the outside doesn't mean that it's going to be glamorous on the inside. The film discusses about how the animal actors were being treated in Hollywood, as while they were allowed to get roles in various movies, they weren't allowed to get any major roles, which means that they were relegated to roles where they only have one line and just stand in the background doing nothing. The film stresses about how many animal actors had come to Hollywood hoping to achieve their dreams of becoming famous actors, only to have their hopes dashed when they realized that animal actors were not allowed to become big stars like humans. This seems to parallel the real-life struggles that black actors had during the 1920s and the 1930s, as they weren't allowed to act in movies due to the racism and bigotry that was going on during that time. It's also interesting to note that this film takes place in 1939, which was the same year that racism and bigotry was commonplace in society at the time. This also reminded me a bit of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where the Toons in that movie were treated like second-class citizens, as they mainly do performances for the humans, and they actually lived in a separate town from the humans called Toontown. The film never sugarcoated the negative effects that racism and bigotry can have on the people who are victims of such treatment. In this case, all the animal actors in the film had come to Hollywood hoping to become famous actors, but once they realized that Hollywood was bigoted towards the animal actors, they had given up all hope on becoming famous actors and resigned themselves to just being background characters. It wasn't until Danny came along and reminded the animal actors of why they came to Hollywood in the first place, and that they shouldn't let other people's opinions about them prevent them from achieving their dreams. Unlike many films that I had seen at the time, this film never shied away from showing the ugly side of Hollywood. When we think of Hollywood, we think that Hollywood is this glamorous place where dreams can come true. However, this film shows that Hollywood can be a cruel place to be in, especially with how the animal actors were being treated. This situation is even more relevant nowadays due to the recent real-life events that's plaguing Hollywood, which I would not go into. The animal actors felt like giving up their dreams of becoming famous because they knew that everyone in Hollywood would not accept them, because they are different. So Danny had to show the other animal actors that sometimes you just have to fight for what you want, no matter how much the odds are stacked against you, which is a battle that many people have to face in real life. So now that I talked about some of the themes that were discussed in this movie, I would like to talk about some of the characters. The first character that I wanted to talk about is none other than Danny himself. Danny was a very interesting character, as he was shown as being very idealistic about accomplishing his dreams of becoming a famous actor. He is also the most optimistic character in the entire film, as while the other animals had lost hope in becoming famous actors, Danny continues to try to follow his dreams despite the odds being stacked against him. It may seem like Danny is being too naive about the whole situation, since he doesn't seem to be too affected by the fact that the animal actors are being treated terribly in Hollywood, but Danny is actually much more resourceful in his efforts to achieve his dreams than what we are led to believe. Towards the end of the film, when the main antagonist Darla Dimple tried to ruin the animal stage show, Danny seemed to know about Darla's temper and egotism, and he was able to use it against her by letting her try to sabotage the stage show while the animals used the sabotaging as a part of their stage show. I like the fact that even though Danny remains to be optimistic throughout the film, there were moments where even he had lost hope of achieving his dreams. After the scene where Darla Dimple tricked him into flooding the stage, messing up the animal's reputation with LB Mammoth, all of the other animals turned on Danny and told him to go back home. It was then that Danny believed that he was being too naive and that he should just go back home, since Hollywood seemed to be unwilling to give animal actors like him a chance to shine in the spotlight. It wasn't until Danny saw how miserable the animals were due to losing their jobs that he immediately went back to set things right. It shows that Danny has more depth to his character, as he is not always so cheerful, and that even he could become depressed when things don't go the way that he planned. Sawyer was another interesting character in the film. She serves as a sort of foil to Danny's positive personality, while she is always cynical. Like Danny, Sawyer had also arrived to Hollywood with dreams of becoming a famous dancer and singer, but once she saw the harsh reality of Hollywood, she decided to abandon her own dreams and become a snarky and cynical secretary. The reason why Sawyer was a bit harsh with Danny at first was because she didn't want Danny to experience the same heartbreak that she felt when she couldn't pursue her dreams. It wasn't until she saw how determined Danny was in pursuing his own dreams that she started to remember about her own dreams and how she should pursue her dreams again. I love the character development that Sawyer goes through, as she started out the movies as being very cynical towards everyone, especially Danny. But once she saw how cheerful and determined Danny was towards his goals, Sawyer then starts becoming much more optimistic herself. This then led to Sawyer being the first animal to actually believe in Danny once again, as she tries to help Danny out with his plan to make the animals famous in Hollywood. And now I would like to talk about the main villain of the film, Darla Dimple herself. Darla Dimple was a very unique type of villain because she is a young child who happens to be very manipulative and aggressive for someone her age. Well, that's if she is actually a young child, according to some rumors about her true age. But since that hasn't been confirmed yet, I'm going to assume that Darla Dimple is actually a young child. Anyway, Darla Dimple is a famous child star actress who often maintains a friendly and cute persona whenever she's on camera. But once she's off camera, she is nothing more than a spoiled brat with an explosive temper, and she often uses her huge and scary butler Max to take care of anything that displeases her. Darla Dimple represents the actors and actresses who often put on a friendly face while they're on camera, but are actually cruel people in real life. Now, I'm not saying that all actors and actresses are cruel people in real life. There are actually some actors and actresses who are generally nice people in real life, and I have met some very nice actors and actresses whenever I went to comic book conventions. But Darla Dimple uses her cute and friendly girl persona to manipulate the public into thinking that she is a sweet and innocent girl, since the public at large don't know what her real personality is like. This allows her to get away with any heinous crime that she committed throughout the film. What makes Darla Dimple so interesting as a character is that she is able to easily manipulate both the public and all the animal actors despite being a very young child. I never would have thought that I would see a movie that has a young character be capable of such manipulation and cruelty. Even though Darla Dimple can manipulate people with ease, her biggest flaw is her explosive temper. Darla can't go through the whole movie without reacting violently to other people whenever things don't go her way. This was best shown in the scene when Danny started acting out of turn during Darla's rehearsal, and Darla completely loses it. This scene not only shows that Darla has an explosive temper, but it also shows that she refuses to let anyone steal a spotlight. Towards the end of the film, when the animals were performing the Nothing's Gonna Stop Us song number, Darla tried to ruin their performance. But each time she tried to mess with the sound and the lighting effects on the stage, it only ended up making the animals' performance much more spectacular. This then causes Darla to lose her temper and oust herself as the one who actually flooded the stage that caused the animals to lose their jobs in the first place. After this accidental confession, Darla ended up losing her fame and fortune and had to work as a janitor by the end of the film. So basically, Darla's own ego and selfishness ended up throwing her career down the drain because she was unwilling to share the spotlight with the animal actors. And then there's Darla's large and fearsome butler Max. So is Max a giant gorilla, or is he some kind of Frankenstein monster? The movie was pretty vague about Max's true species, and that's what makes Max scary because we don't really know anything about him. It was interesting that Max was shown as possessing superhuman speed and strength whenever he is going after Danny, as it shows just how effective he is as Darla's bodyguard. And it also shows you why everyone else is afraid to confront Darla, because they don't want to mess with Max. I most certainly don't want to mess with a big scary guy who could possibly crush me with his bare hands. Anyway, I really enjoyed the chase scene between Max and Danny towards the end of the film, as it shows that Max is not as stoic as he is shown to be throughout the movie. During this scene, it shows that he could be just as crazy and psychotic as Darla Dimple can be, and it was quite an intense scene to watch since I was worried that Max would actually succeed in grabbing Danny. One of the biggest highlights of this film was the animation itself. I had mentioned before that I found the animation in this film to be reminiscent of the Looney Tunes franchise, as it has a zany vibe to it. The interesting thing about the animation style of this movie is that while the animation has a wacky feel to it, the subject matter tackled in this film is surprisingly mature. You wouldn't think that a movie that is tackling the subject of prejudice and racism as in humans against animals, would have zany animation. But somehow this worked for the film, and it actually made this film much livelier in tone. I also love how fluid the animation is, as the animation captures the exaggerated features of the characters very well. Especially the scenes where Darla Dimple's facial expression switches from being sweet and innocent to being vicious and scary in a matter of seconds. Another big highlight of this film was the music. Many of the songs in this film were very well done, with my favorites being Our Time Has Come, Danny's Arrival song, Big and Loud, Tell Me Lies, and especially Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now. Each song really conveys how each character felt about the situations that they were thrown into. Like Danny's Arrival song expresses just how excited Danny felt about being in Hollywood for the first time. And then you have a sad song called Tell Me Lies, which was sung by the late Natalie Cole, where Sawyer is depressed over the animal actors being fired after the incident with the studio being flooded. But then it was during this song that Sawyer started to realize her feelings for Danny, and afterwards she tries to help Danny out with his plans and getting the animal actors the star that they deserve during the final act of the film. And of course you have the iconic song Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now, where the music becomes much more triumphant as the animals realize that they can't let anyone get them down just because they are animals. And you can see the determination that the animal actors are showing during the song number, as they had to go through a lot of tough trials just to become the famous stars that they wanted to become in the first place. Now that I talked about the things that I liked about this movie, I would like to talk about some of the problems that I had with this film. For one thing, I felt that we don't know much about the characters' backgrounds. I mean, sure, we know a bit about Danny and the other animals' backgrounds, as they all have moved away from their homes to go to Hollywood to achieve their dreams of becoming famous, and then they all had their hopes dashed when they realized that Hollywood doesn't give any big roles to the animal actors. But I would like to know more about what the animal actors were like before they came to Hollywood. Were they just as idealistic as Danny was when he first got to Hollywood? Or have they always been a bit cynical but still wanted to pursue their dreams? And then there's a line in Darla Dimple's song Big and Loud, where she mentions about how she didn't get to where she got to today by being pushed around. So, was she bullied before she became a star? Or was she just that much of a spoiled brat in the first place? And then I was a bit curious about the world that the animals lived in. So, when did the animals start living among the humans and start pursuing the same goals that the humans do? Now, I know that this is just a fictional animated movie, and I'm not supposed to take any of this seriously, but I just can't help it. I wanted to know how the animals moved into Hollywood in the first place, and when did Hollywood make the rules about animals not being allowed to take on the big roles? Cats Don't Dance is rated G. There's honestly nothing too inappropriate in this movie, except for a few intense scenes, especially with Max and Danny's chase scene on the big Darla Dimple balloon towards the end of the film. But overall, this film can be enjoyed by the whole family. Overall, I'd give Cats Don't Dance a score of an 8.5 out of 10. Even though I wish that the movie had explored the characters' backgrounds a bit more and also discussed more about the world that they lived in, I did like the fact that this movie had tackled tough subjects like racism and prejudice and presented them in a family-friendly way that both kids and adults can have discussions about. The songs and the animation really made this movie stand out to me, as they were very unique from what we normally saw from the Disney films at the time, even though this movie was made by Warner Brothers. It's a shame that this film was a box office bomb, and it doesn't get talked about a lot in most animation circles, but I think that this film deserves to be more well known for its creative animation and storytelling, and for its memorable songs. Hope you enjoy my review of Cats Don't Dance.
Psst. Hey you.
Have you been enjoying the Reviews 2.0 videos? Want to get an added bonus for viewing these videos? Like getting early access to these videos before they are released on YouTube? Or being able to request what movies and TV shows I should review next? Then please feel free to support these videos through my Patreon account. Check out all of the tier titles on my account and choose which tier title you want to be known as. You could become a new member on the block, an early bird, be a part of the future Bunch team, a backstage passenger, an animation superstar, and last but not least, the honorary supreme. So show off your tier title name to the world once you support the Reviews 2.0 videos through Patreon.